the most kind of overarching insight for me is just the reality that my life is meant to serve something greater than myself. Wow, imagine that. Of course, I knew that before the refocusing process, but actually seeing that and grounding into the reality that that's actually the most fulfilling way to live. Like, we started having our neighbors over for dinners. What I found was that influenced the rest of my month, because it got me thinking when walking through the neighborhood, what if right now wasn't just about me going home because I'm tired and getting in my own space, and was actually there were opportunities to connect within the kingdom here. So I think bringing to a practical level that my life is meant to serve something else all the time has been huge. So I chose my favorite tea, blackberry rooibos, the only naturally caffeine-free tea, by the way. Very good for your prostate health. And
I knew from Ron going earlier.
I chose tea because tea infuses infuses what's around it, and so just thinking about the metaphor of our life being meant to not just stay in a bag, but actually to infuse that which is around it is really meaningful to me. And I think also another insight was when we were doing Activate, recognizing that living missionally is not as difficult as I may have made up before this process, or I may have judged myself like I don't really have those passions or gifts. I'm more of a introverted or pastoral type presence. I don't really have that hands and feet type of passion. I never considered myself a missionary or evangelist. But then looking at my timeline, looking at my calling statement, realize in the context of my everyday life, I am really passionate about connecting with people who are seeking God, and that is not as difficult to do as I had judged that it was. And so the tea metaphor, again, just the idea that it's not that difficult to make a cup of tea. You just have to be intentional about it. And if I'm intentional, then I can open up a space to have the kingdom manifest, hopefully, pretty easily. And then the third part of the metaphor is that there's the comfort of, I love being with people one-on-one, and the comfort of sharing a cup of tea with somebody and connecting on a heart level. So all those things have been huge for me in the process, in addition to just being with you guys, and I think learning or not learning, but being in a very natural context, growing with one another and sharing our weaknesses without it being sort of like, now's the time where we have to be vulnerable. It's just felt very much like a fellow journeying together. I really appreciated that. So I think the final thing for me is, I was having a conversation with our lead deacon at Activate, and a bunch of things. I was asking myself, the conversation helped me ask, why are we doing the refocusing process? I mean, internally, intuitively, I've believed in it. I've known, as soon as I heard about it, I was like, yes, this is it. This is where we need to go as a church. So I was totally all in, but it's kind of like I was all in, but my brain was catching up with why that was. Like, I believed in the importance of it, but I hadn't articulated it. And I think I was having this conversation with our lead deacon. He was saying, he was talking about how most of the stuff that he does is serving the church, and he's hoping that in serving the church, it'll have an impact outside the church, which I think is true. But what clicked in for me was a recognition that for every believer in our community, whatever their gifts are, whether their gifts are more hospitality and internally focused, whatever their gifts are, that all of us, if we're not in touch with mission as a primary focus, that everything becomes ungrounded. And because Jesus' last command was go and make disciples. It wasn't stay and learn more and make yourself feel good about how great your community is. It's about going. And so I think that freed me up from, rather than saying, well, this stuff is bad, the stuff we're doing, these programs are bad, the only good thing is mission, from saying, this stuff that we're doing is great. It's great stuff. And if we don't make mission primary, then all of that stuff just gets ungrounded, it becomes limp, and it loses its zest, it loses its flavor. And so even for somebody like me, who I would probably say my giftedness and passion really truly are more inclined towards pastoring rather than missionary, being a missionary, being an evangelist, that I can acknowledge that that's more of my passionness and giftedness, and still say, yeah, and this time and this primary focus on mission is critical for me. And it's not that one's good and the other's bad or anything like that, or I have to judge anything. It's just saying that without this ingredient, everything that I do will become ungrounded. And that way for our community, that if we don't make it a primary focus, that we'll become ungrounded. And so that created a lot of freedom for me to rather than put things in good bad categories, to say, you know what, the giftedness that you may have so and so towards serving the church is great, and also ground that with serving the unchurched, those that are seeking God, and as a whole community, to recognize there's going to be some in our community that are more inclined towards mission and some less inclined, but all of us have to make it a grounding point, or over time the community will just get inbred and focused on stuff that is secondary. And so that created a lot of freedom for me to recognize, to not beat myself up for not being an evangelist or a missionary, in my primarily natural giftedness, and then recognizing that even despite that, I can still make it a primary focus. And that was just really freeing for me.